It's time for another edition of Out and About with Jamie Grout, and I'm excited to talk to my victim today. I shouldn't call him a victim, but he's a guy that I guess I look up to, and I wish I had known earlier in my career because he's every bit as nice in person as he is on the radio. And he's given me lots of great advice over the years and whatnot. I don't know how to introduce this gentleman because I was thinking of so many different ways. So I'm thinking that maybe Ed Sullivan could introduce Van Harden.
And now, our show, and you kiddies are going to like this. Kate Smith's been on our show approximately 56 times, and I'm sick of looking at her. So instead, we're going to have Van Harden, former morning man and program director for 35 years at WHO Radio in Des Moines. Bring them out. Roll them out here.
Woo! And I'll add to that, 5-time Marconi Award winner?
Yeah.
Too? Which is like, if you're not a radio person, it is the Oscars of radio,
Yeah.
I would say. So, Van, thanks for coming in and doing this podcast with me. I don't know where to start. You are not only a broadcaster's broadcaster, you're an author, you're an inventor. I got to wonder what's going on in your mind sometimes because you must constantly be thinking about things. Do you miss being on the radio?
I guess the first answer should be I do not miss getting up at 2:45 in the morning, which I did for 35 years.
Good heavens.
And I remember when I was doing that, people said, how do you do that? And I didn't even think about it. I just did it. But now that I'm not doing it, as I think back, and I mean, I've been up once at 2:45, and that was to go to the bathroom, since then. I'm not sure how I did it either.
Yeah.
But God blessed me with the ability to get that done. But at the end, it got harder and harder and harder just because I'm getting older.
Sure. You spoke at our Newton Rotary Club here a while back, and you told an interesting story about you've told me about how you got into radio and Roy Fox, who was a big influence on you, and you sent out some letters, and we'll get to that. But even before that, before you sent out the letters to the DJs, what do you think it was that made you think about getting into radio and being curious about it?
Well, my father used to be very concerned about me when I was a kid. What are you going to do to make a living? How are you going to earn money and all that? And I mean, he was relentless with this. I mean, every week, if not every day. And I just wanted to ride my bike around Adel. I didn't think about stuff like that. And then I got to thinking, well, I probably better come up with an answer for this guy. And I just noticed that before I went to school, I was listening to the radio, and it was WHO, oddly enough, and it was Don Warren at the time. And after a while, he kind of was like a friend to me, even though we'd never met one another. And so then they had an ad on there that they're starting a new program in the afternoon called The Fox's Den. And Roy Fox was going to do that. So as soon as I get home from school, I'd turn it back on and I'd listen to The Fox's Den. And then Roy Fox had an hour break, and then he did Clear Channel Conversation. And so I realized I'm listening to the radio all the time, and these guys sound like they're having fun. And it dawned on me that apparently they pay these people to do that, albeit not very much necessarily. But so I sought out my dad, and I said, Dad, I have an answer to your question. And he says, good, what do you want to do? I said, I want to be on the radio. And you would have thought I said, I want to go to Ringling Brothers and be the human cannonball. It just, nobody in our family had ever had a history of having a good voice or doing anything like that. He was an insurance guy. And so he got this big grin, and he said, quote, you'll get over that.
Oh, not so much.
And I did, but it took 50 years.
Sure.
So that's how I first inched into this.
And then you wrote a letter to a bunch of DJs, and Roy Fox was the only one that responded to you, right?
Yeah, I wrote a letter to 5 guys, people that I had listened to, and by that time I was dialing around listening to other guys too. And I wrote the same letter to 5 people, and the letter was this: Dear so-and-so, I listen to you on the radio every day. I think you really do a good job, and I think maybe I might like to do that for a career too. What do you suggest? Signed, Van Harden. And I remember riding my bike down to the Adel post office and dropping those letters in the mailbox and thinking, this is going to be great. I'm going to hear back from my friends,
Mhm.
And I waited and waited and waited and didn't hear anything from anybody, and I kind of gave up on it. And then one night, I was doing my homework, which was amazing in itself, but my mom said, the phone rang and she said, it's for you. I said, okay. So I went over and I said, hello. And this voice said, hello, Van, this is Roy Fox, and we're live on Clear Channel Conversation right now. And I said one of the wittiest things I've ever said on radio. I said, really? He said, yeah. He said, I got your letter, and do you mind if I read it on the air to the audience? And I said, no, that'd be fine. So he read it, then there was a pause, and he said, I want you to know that when I was a kid, I wrote a letter almost exactly like this.
Wow.
And a guy helped me. So now I'm going to help you. Wow. Okay.
That's neat.
So I hung up, and my dad said, who was that? And I said, it was Roy Fox on WHO radio. And he used to listen to Roy Fox. He said, you're kidding me. I said, no. He has invited us to come down to the radio station Saturday. He's going to be working, and he would give us a tour of the station and answer any questions that we might have. And so I thought, wow.
Yeah.
So we went down there. Sure enough, he was there. He spent 2 hours with us, showing us around, telling us what everything did, answering questions. And that made a big impression on me. And I thought, if I ever make it, I'm going to do that same thing when kids want to get into radio.
And did you?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. A lot of them.
Wow.
Sometimes I heard from the parents instead of them. Sometimes I heard from them. But yeah, I consider that an honor. And so I remember the last thing on the tour was the studio where he broadcast. And we went in there, and man, I felt like I was in the North Pole with Santa Claus.
Sure. Now, let me jump in real quick. Was this at the WHO studios that were on Walnut Street?
Yes.
Where the TV and the radio were all together before it moved to Grand Avenue?
That's right.
All right. Sure.
Yeah. So I remember he told us all about how everything worked and the acoustics and all. And then he said, and that's about it. So he opened up the door, and I remember my mom walked out first. And my dad, who was very impressed at this point, walked out second. And then I started to walk out, and I stopped, and I turned around, and I looked at the chair. And I vividly remember, like it was yesterday, saying to myself, I have got to sit in that chair someday.
Sure.
I never dreamed I'd be sitting in it for 35 years.
Yeah. I'll tell you, I had a couple of influences on me getting into radio. My sister, who's 10 years older, dated a guy in high school who worked part-time at KCOB in Newton. And so I would go there, and I was just fascinated by everything. And as a kid, I was petit mal epileptic. And I don't know if you know the difference. There's grand mal, where you have the big seizures, and petit mal, which is like, it looks like you're daydreaming. And some people wouldn't even notice, but my parents did. And so I'd have to go to blank from time to time. And one of those trips, I begged my parents to take me by the street side studios of KIOA. It was on that road in Keogh.
And they had windows in it.
Yeah, and on the right side, you could watch the DJ. And in the middle was the doorway, and on the left side was the newsroom. And I tell this to Phil Thomas all the time. And I was just, Van, it was like magic.
Yeah.
It was like magic. And this guy was having fun. He was telling jokes, talking on the phone, playing music. And even at that age, and maybe you did too, but I perceived that a lot of adults didn't really enjoy their job.
Yeah.
And you and I got into a profession that was fun.
That's absolutely true.
Wow. Fantastic.
Yeah, I just remember thinking after a while, I thought, this radio thing, you used the word magic. It is magic. I mean, these people sit in front of a hunk of metal that's got a wire coming out of it.
Right.
And the wire goes somewhere.
Uh-huh.
And then eventually it goes out to a transmitter site, and it runs through an exciter.
Sure.
I said that's why my program was so exciting. It went through an exciter.
Right.
And then it goes up the tower and out it goes. And magically, people have these little boxes in their car and in their house, and they turn a knob, and your voice has flown through the air and gone to their little box, and it comes out, and they can control how loud it is. I say, that really is amazing.
Yeah.
To me, that's more amazing than TV. Because TV uses that same thing for the audio.
Yeah. So, gosh, so many things I want to ask you. I am going to go back in time to where you were first on the air, and it was in Perry, right?
Yes.
Okay. How long were you there?
About 2.5 years.
Okay.
3 years, maybe.
And then you went to Tulsa?
Yes.
And I heard an air check. Now, this was like a beautiful music station you were on, right?
Yeah.
You must have been bored to tears.
Yeah.
pretty much.
Yeah, pretty much.
And then did you go to KRNT after that?
Yes. They called me, and the program director at KRNT said, I can't believe I found you. We had our ears on you when you were in Perry, and I wanted to hire you.
Was that Del Hall?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, so I called out to the station, and you weren't there. And then I came back, and he found me, and so they hired me to be the all-night man on KRNT. I was the first guy ever to keep KRNT on after midnight.
Oh, is that right? Okay.
And I did that for about 3 months, and then Del Hall called me at home one time and woke me up because I had a weird sleeping schedule because of that. And he said, hey, you need to come down to the office. And I said, okay. And I thought, how much trouble can I possibly get into between midnight and 6 in the morning? So I came in, and he said, I got to tell you, I got up last night to go to the bathroom, and I turned on the radio, and you told one of the funniest stories I've ever heard. And from now on, you're going to be on in the middle of the day.
Wow. Isn't that great?
Yeah.
So he must have been a great mentor for you.
Yeah, he was a good guy, and he used to have a lot of strict rules. And then I can remember asking him about some things, and he said, things don't really have to happen this way.
Oh.
Things can be massaged, like the music list. Boy, we had to play certain ones at certain times.
So he gave you some wiggle room.
Well, yeah, but he was trying to give me the principle of broadcasting that, what I set up for you is good, but it may not be the best, and there may be others, and that's okay.
Huh. That's good. Not all program directors are like that.
Yeah.
So that's fantastic.
Yeah.
And I listen, by the way, if you ever want to hear good Des Moines radio history, go to DesMoinesBroadcasting.com.
Oh, there's some great stuff.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And I heard your first shift on KRNT when you were working overnights. And we're here at the Machine Shed recording this in Des Moines. And every month, the first Wednesday of every month, a group called Microphonies gets together. And they're a bunch of people who are currently in radio or retired from radio. And the guy who organizes this was the morning guy that you were promoting. And
then after that change, I got off at nights. They had me follow Ray Dennis.
Oh, is that right? Okay,
he was on till 10, and I was on after that.
Might be a hard question to answer. I don't know, but what was the one thing in all your 50 years in radio that stands out to you as the most memorable thing?
I think it was, and I don't know what the day it was, but when I first got into this, I was all enamored with queuing up records and playing tapes and music and all of that. And it didn't take me too long after I got on the air to figure out that's not the fun part of this. The fun part is the listeners, the people that would call and talk to me, and the people that I would see when I went out and about. And, I don't know how many accountants get off of their job and go to the grocery store, and people say, boy, you did a great job accounting today,
Right.
But when I was on the radio, I'd go to the grocery store, and people said, man, that story you told about that was great. And just the feedback that you get.
Sure. It's like applause.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, because when you're in the studio, you don't know how people are responding.
No. No.
but when they come back to you and mention things, that's fantastic.
I know. One time I hosted I forget whether it was a concert or a political thing or something, but they wanted me to host the thing, so I came out, and it was right during a presidential election, and I said something about, this is an honor for me to do this, but you know why? Because I don't have to break for 60 seconds or 2 minutes.
Sure.
And boy, the place busted out in applause because everybody was sick of the political ads.
You told a story I want to go to because it's pretty funny. You had a speaking engagement at a classroom at Interstate 35 schools, I believe it was.
Yep.
Tell that story, because those kids were excited to have you in there.
Oh yeah, I had lots of requests to speak, and one of them was I forget what it was, middle school or junior high or something, and so I went down there to New Virginia or St. Charles or wherever it was, and after the teacher asked me to come, she'd call me every few days, and she said, "I just can't tell you how excited these kids are that you're going to be coming to our class to speak." And I thought, well, that's, get puffed up about that, but I thought it was kind of weird because it's not like I was a rock star or something. So anyway, I went down there, and she opened up the door and introduced me, and I went in, and it was stone cold silent. They thought Van Halen was coming. And to this day, that's one of the longest hours of my life.
I bet.
Yeah.
I bet. You almost got out of radio, too, to work at a packing plant.
Oh, well, yeah.
And you had something, maybe it was sent from heaven or something, that kind of changed your mind. What happened there, Van?
Well, a guy who was on KRNT right after my shift, I walked in and he was reading the newspaper one day. I said, "What are you looking at?" And he said, "I'm looking at the want ads." He says, "Look at this. Out in Perry, Iowa, at the Oscar Mayer plant, they're paying people triple what we're making here to stuff hot dogs." I said, "You're kidding." He says, "No." He says, should we go stuff hot dogs? Because he had the same problem I did.
Right.
And we said, "Nah, we're having too much fun." And so I moaned and groaned, and I had a real pity party about this whole thing, about how I love this job, but I can hardly pay for gas and food.
Right. It doesn't pay very well, especially at the beginning.
So the next day I came into the station, and the receptionist says, "Van, there's a guy here that's been sitting that wants to talk to you." And so I sat down next to him, and he told me a story. He said, my sister was in a real bad car accident a while back, and it was bad enough that she went unconscious immediately. And he said, we took her, she was at the hospital in Des Moines, and they tried everything. They couldn't do anything to get her out of it. So they life flighted her, air life or whatever it is, over to Iowa City, and they're trying over there. And he said, they're not making any progress either. And so the guy said, we, the family, asked the doctors, is there anything we should be doing that might help along with this? And so they said, well, about the only thing you can do is surround her with things that she was familiar with on a daily basis. Mm-hmm. So they got stuff out of her living room and her bedroom, and they put it next, the bedstand and everything. And then he said, I got to thinking. He said, she told me one time that she listens to you every day on the radio, and that you seem like a friend to her, which resonated with me. And he said, they can't get KRNT in Iowa City. Would you record? He pulled out a cassette. These were cassette days. Pulled out a cassette, and he said, could you record part of your program, and we want to take it and play it to her? And I said, well, I'd be honored to. So I took the cassette, and I went in there and recorded the program, and I even stopped and talked to her. I said, hey, Teresa, I met your brother. What a great guy. And he told me a little bit about what you've been through. And I want you to know that all back here in Des Moines, we're all thinking of you and praying for you. And I just think things are going to get better. And so I got done, and I took the cassette and walked up to the front, and he was still there. So I gave him the cassette, and he started to leave. And I said, now, wait a minute. You got to let me know what happens. Even if nothing happens, then I want to know that. He said, oh, yeah, we'll let you know. So a couple of days went by, and a few more days, and I thought this is going to be just like when I tried to get those letters, responses from the jocks, and I'm not hearing anything. And so then one day, the receptionist says, Van, there's a call for you on line 4. So I picked it up, and this weird voice said, she wiggled her feet. I said, who is this? I've heard about calls like this. Who is this? And he said, I'm the brother of the girl that was in the car wreck. I said, she wiggled her feet? He said, yeah, when you were playing the music, all of a sudden her feet started going back and forth to the beat of the music. I said, really? He said, then when you started talking to her, I still get the hair standing up on my neck. When you started talking to her, her eyes opened up. And long story short, she's going to be just fine.
Oh, my gosh.
And so they came out to the Iowa State Fair where I was that year. And she was in a wheelchair, but she was going to be getting rid of that too. And they wheeled her over to me, and she stood up, and she and I hugged each other for a long time. We were both bawling like babies.
Oh, isn't that sweet?
Yeah. And so then the family started to leave, and the guy came back, and he said, I just need to tell you how much this has meant to our family. And I said, well, I want to tell you how much it's meant to me, because a few days ago I was thinking about going to Perry, Iowa and stuffing hot dogs instead of doing this.
And that was your sign that you needed to stay in radio.
So, and I think a lot of times when people don't think they're where they're supposed to be, or they're not doing what they're supposed to do, they probably are and just don't necessarily know it. But it got pointed out vividly to me.
Right. Which leads me into your strong faith that you've had. You taught Sunday school for how many years?
40.
And you've written a book years ago. You've written, what, 3 books?
Well, I'm on my 3rd one right now. Okay. I got another one coming out here soon.
Oh, okay. What's the name of that going to be?
Jesus, the prequel.
Okay.
It's all about Jesus before Bethlehem.
Oh, okay. All right. Now, the one that I really am impressed by is Life in the Purple Wedge.
Yeah.
And is that going to be made into a movie or something?
I had a contact about it, and they said, we're very interested in it. I thought, how can you make that book into a movie? Even I couldn't figure that out. And they said, or it could be TV thing. So anyway, they're thinking about it. To tell you the truth, I don't expect that to go anywhere. I never expected that in the first place, but it was flattering that they were thinking of it.
So for those who don't know, you have a good description of Life in the Purple Wedge. Go ahead and explain that.
Okay, well, there was the day you were born and the day you're going to die. And I have a big red round circle, and the day you were born is on the left, the day you're going to die is on the right, on those dots. And you're making your way through this red circle. I made it red because life can be traumatic sometimes.
Okay.
And so then, you know, if you decide to become a Christian and if you accept Christ, then all of a sudden God's kingdom, which is another world, moves over your red circle at whatever point you did that, and you're living in 2 worlds at the same time. And red plus blue equals purple. So welcome to life in the purple wedge, and you'll be in the purple wedge until you die, and then you're going to be in the blue kingdom forever.
Sure. Okay, just real quick. Biggest promotions you've been involved in. I could read them off, but I'll let you talk about them. I can remember some of them. I can even remember when you're back on KRNT and you had Paul Lind on.
Oh, yeah.
He was in Vegas or someplace. Yeah. And then you also did a thing with the gubernatorial candidates, and it was a deal where they could be on the air with you, but they couldn't do any politicking or something like that.
If they did anything political, then we played a buzzer and they had to stop.
Okay. Yeah. What else?
Probably the biggest, in terms of numbers, the biggest thing we did was the corn dog chomp.
Okay.
The state fair called me and they said, hey, we usually are a little low on attendance the first day of the fair, and we want to do a promotion. So we had some meetings, and I suggested, how about if we try to break a world's record for the most people eating a corn dog at the same time? Oh, we love that. So they got all of the corn dog providers to come and cook corn dogs all night long. And then we invited people to come, and they said, you can even get into the fair free if you get here before 8:30.
Okay.
42,000 people.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
In
That's
fact,
crazy.
and we did it in the grandstand, and that only seats 11,000. And there was a lineup trying to get in, and the Des Moines police were mad because there were traffic jams out on the freeway, and people were jumping out of the car and running across the median. So, I mean, to me, that just shows the power of radio.
Sure, you bet. And there's also the Leisure Suit Convention that you did.
8 years of that.
Yeah, and then chocolate breakfast too.
Chocolate breakfast, and we did the Journeys to the Center of the Earth, where we went down into limestone mines with thousands of listeners, and buses.
Did you? And am I dreaming this, or did you and Mark Allen do a show where Mark or somebody was in a what do you call it? One of those suits?
Knight of Armor.
Yeah. And you
we
were
shot
shooting
golf balls at
balls.
it. It was out of the driving range.
Shout out to Mark Allen, Newton resident, an investment guy, and also radio guy.
Yeah.
Our group is forming here. You can hear the noise in the background. We're getting ready to start with the microphonies meeting. Just real quick, do you have any questions of me, Van?
Well, I just want to tell you how much I admire what you're doing. And I have known many people that have gone through what you've been going through the last couple of years.
Right.
And in fact, as far as I know, I'm the only guy that's radio that's never been fired that I'm aware of.
I know.
And so I just want you to know that, those things happen for various reasons. And I'm here to tell you, it wasn't because of you or your talent or your enthusiasm. And people appreciate you.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much.
Yep.
People appreciate you too, and I maybe I'll get back in someday. Who knows? I think the Lord has a plan for all of us.
Yeah.
As I sit around this room, the legendary Peter McLean is sitting here along with Phil Thomas and many others who are great radio people. So we're going to wrap this up. And by the way, the name for this podcast was suggested by Van. So when you hear the name of this podcast, it's because Van Harden titled it. So this will be wrapping it up for this podcast with Out and About with Jamie Grout. Till next time, Grout is out. See ya.